The American Revolution is a perfect example of that. That was won by 15 or less than 15% of the population of the colonies. There were 15% on the other side. They were loyalists. And that left 70% in the middle who were saying, gee, I don't know whichever side wins is okay with me. They didn't want to get involved and did not get involved. So we had the loyalists, the know-nothingers, and the patriots, the ones that were that 15%. You see that ratio, that, of course, it's hard to know the exact numbers in history, but you get the impression that's a good ratio average for every major movement in history that we have a recorded history of. It's that small 15 percenters that make it happen. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Gee, Edward Griffin, it's so nice to meet you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, my friend. Where,
Yeah.
what part of the world are you in?
Sydney, Australia. So south,
Sydney.
yeah, just south of Sydney, about an hour and 30 minutes
Uh-huh.
on the east coast. Yeah, it's a beautiful little town that I've grown up in all my life, funnily enough. So, yeah, have you ever been to Australia?
Mhm. Yes, I have twice,
Yeah,
uh,
right.
but I haven't seen very much of it.
When did you come to Australia last?
Oh, I think the last time I was there about 10 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Right,
Yeah.
yeah, right before well, things started to get really hairy, what, 5 years
Yeah.
ago-ish? So,
It was
yeah,
amazingly peaceful in those days.
yeah,
And then I
lovely.
remember I got lost in the streets of Sydney. There was some curly Q streets there, if I remember correctly.
Edward, I'm from this area and I get lost in Sydney, so don't feel bad. It's one of those areas that will confuse anyone on a good day, even if you live there.
Yeah, I remember we had reservations in a hotel right practically in the middle of town, I think it was. I could see the hotel, but there was no way I could get to it. I was driving around in circles, and no matter
Yep,
which way I tried, it was always the wrong direction. So I
you are
remember
not
that
alone.
occasion.
I,
Very
I've done that
frustrating.
many times, so you're not alone there, my friend.
Uh-huh.
Edward, I
So,
wanted to make mention. I know there's a lot that I want to talk to you about, and been following your work for a little ways. But I want to make mention of your age. I hope if you don't mind, because the last time I heard a couple of podcasts with some friends of mine that run a podcast called Here for the Truth. And at that time, I think you were either 91 or 92, and it was a couple of years ago. So have I got your age incorrect? Are you like 93 or 94? Is that right?
that is correct. I am 93.
93.
I'm in my I'm on my 94th trip around the world, around the
Amazing.
sun. I'll get it out right. 94th trip around the sun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, look, I want to commend you because it's you're inspirational in many ways, but I think in terms of having a sound mind and hopefully sound enough body to get you around to do the things that you do, to keep doing what you're doing, and 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 in the I guess I would say tenacity was probably the word that comes to mind. The way that you keep chasing after it is it's really impressive, and I'm just blown away that and inspired at the same time that this is what I can look forward to if I keep my mind sharp and my body healthy, and I have some sort of vigor and rigorous pursuit of passion or pursuit of happiness or a purpose or whatever you want to call it. Then maybe I could be like you when I grow up.
Well, I wouldn't recommend it, but anyway, I guess it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I wouldn't mind prefacing this conversation with perhaps your message going forward to the world from this point, and maybe we can sort of reverse engineer this process of how you come to this recommendation, this piece of advice, this, I don't know, heed of warning, however you want to put it. Is there a particular something, a message, a word of wisdom that you would say to anyone in this moment in time on this earth, considering your journey so far?
That's a very good question. A word of wisdom. Well, I don't know how wise, but I always have opinions, and I'm always anxious to express them.
Hmm.
And my wife always cautions cautions me against being too forward in that amount. So, but the point I'm driving to is that my opinion or my passion of the day changes from day to day. Not so much by what's in the news, because that's pretty monotonous. I know what's in the news. I think I understand the forces that are making the news well enough that I can predict the news. And I don't say that boastfully. I say it regrettably, actually, because I wish it wasn't so predictable. But anyway, the wisdom of the day, let's see, what is it today? I think the wisdom of today is be grateful that you took time off to do the little dirty things that needed to be done that you've been putting off for a long time. Now, that may not sound like it's very wise or very earth-shaking, but for me, it's little things like that that all add up to the total. We had a flood in our house 5 months ago. We were away from home, and when my wife got back here before I did, she drove ahead of me, and she called me on the phone. She said, "You better get your fanny here pretty fast." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, I opened up the door, and it was like Noah's Ark. All the water came rushing out the front door." So okay, so we had a flood, a broken pipe while we were gone, and a lot of water had flooded in throughout the house. And make a long story short, everything just about had to be taken down. All the furniture was moved out into storage. We were moved out in temporary housing for about 5 months, while they tore up the floor, the tile, the carpets, most of the plaster, a lot of the wood, and they just rebuilt the house almost from the ground up. But the only thing that was left was the roof, and that wasn't affected by the flood. Fortunately, it wasn't that deep. But so we just got back into the house where our home here. I have my office in my home, and it was only about 7 days ago, and it's hectic because all of our rooms are still stacked with boxes of things that have to be put back to where they came from in the first place. And we discovered a very strange phenomenon in physics that the physical the volume of the material items that are taken out of a house exceeds the space of the house itself. And I don't know if anybody's ever observed that before, but I think we're on to something unusual here. But I say that laughingly because of all of that, we're trying to laugh our way through it, and it's pretty easy. It's little things pile up. If I could turn my camera around, you would see that it probably doesn't look quite as uh, neat as it does behind me. My desk is cluttered with books, papers. Oh, there's a flashlight over there. Oh, the hammer, and I got to put up some pictures on the wall. It's like that. So you asked me what's my thought of the day. It's that well, I took care of a lot of little things that were piling up, but I did that made it open for me today to spend some time with my assistant. Um, she's a wonderful lady. Carleen Potter is her name. She's very sharp. She knows a lot about computer science, and she knows about accounting and all, putting together organizations. And so we finally cleared enough space in my mind and am on my desk to sit down and work out some really serious problems, solutions to problems that we've been putting off. So my wisdom for today is not very global in scope at all. It's a very narrow, but life is filled with those little things. And sometimes, for me at least, I can go to bed with a smile on my face, even though I haven't accomplished everything I wanted to. I figure I've done something that was important. And now I'm going to shift gears and go to the larger picture because a lot of people ask me, well, don't you get frustrated and disappointed and discouraged by the way things are going in the world?
Mm,
And do you really think you're making a difference and so forth? Now this is where I tie all this together, hopefully, is because I can say that when I was a young man, much younger than I am now, and I was just becoming aware of what's going on in the world, I was in a hurry to fix things. I was in a hurry. And I can remember some of the old timers that I was associating with and learning from. They got kind of a little impatient with me, and I remember them saying, uh, "Ed, don't be in such a hurry. You can't. You're not going to change this thing by the next election. You know, this is a long-term project." And in my mind, I kept thinking, "Yeah, what do you know about it? You're all worn out. You know, no, I want to change it by the next election." Well, little did I know they were so right. This is the battle we're in is much bigger than I realized. It's been going on much longer before I became aware of it. And I realize it's transgenerational. And I realize that no one, or even a group of people, is going to make a rapid change, but they can make a change nevertheless. And so my most of my life since I was about, oh, probably about 50, has been with the understanding that this is a transgenerational battle we're in. And I'm not going to probably see a victory in my lifespan. But that is not discouraging because I can go to bed. Now I'm back to the tie-in here. I can go to bed every night with a smile on my face, knowing that even though I probably am not going to see everything honky-dory in my lifespan, for that day, that time that I spent that day, I laid a brick or two in the foundation. And every day, if I can lay a couple of bricks like that, we're on the way to building something much better for the long term in the future. So that's the similarity between my silly little thing about getting the junk off of my desk and laying some building blocks in the foundation for future liberty. It takes a lot of little details, one at a time, very slow. But when you get to be 93 years old, you can look back and say, "Oh, how about that? That tr that trail of bricks goes way over there."
yeah.
So I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but that's what came to mind with that
Mm.
question.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's quite profound because I don't know whether it's a male thing, but I think, we probably are solutions orientated, most of us, and we just want to fix things straight away. And I think when you see a problem and you can see the solution right in front of you, you just want to go like, there's the problem and there's the solution. So just be done with it and fix everything. And I guess what I love about your analogy of the bricks and building a foundation and then building the first floor and then the second floor and then finally putting the roof on and completing your structure or your dwelling that you've built there. I think that is a metaphor for life. I think it's quite profound, as simplistic as it may seem on the surface, because there are things that are going on in the world, and as you've pointed out, have been going on for since the dawn of time, basically. But the first thing that you can do if you want to effect any change is to affect yourself. Would that be a correct assumption of what you're
Oh,
trying to
absolutely.
surmise? I mean, if you don't get your shit together yourself, you can scream and rant and rage about how the world's going to dust, and all you'll be doing is just losing your voice by screaming. But if you're not doing anything every day to create some sort of a ripple effect that either improves your life or the life of someone else, which I think is a exponential achievement, then what else are you doing? You're just whinging and complaining and wallowing in your own, you
Right,
know,
right.
mud.
Mhm. Well, I went through that stage. Fortunately, I came out of it. But anyway, so that's what's on my mind today, the big and the small all together. And of course, being able to talk to you on the other side of the earth it's always amazing to me when these sorts of things happen.
Isn't
When
it?
I was younger, I couldn't even imagine. If somebody told me that I would someday be sitting in a comfortable chair in a warm room here, talking with somebody in Australia and Sydney,
Yeah,
and we'd
yeah.
be looking at each other and joking and laughing and
It's wild,
seeing
isn't
each
it?
other, I would have said, "You're out of your mind, brother."
Yeah.
Impossible.
Yeah. You know what? I say this on almost every podcast ever. Is like I feel so privileged out of the shittiest time in my life, or at least one of the worst times in my life, which is the pandemic and everything that ensued as a result of that. So for me, it was screaming at the rooftops and going through all that emotions of distaste and hatred and frustration and resentment and all of those things, and just being angry with the world, to losing a business, losing a marriage, all those sorts. Everything just sort of came to a big, grinding halt. But one of the things that spawned out of that crappy time was this podcast, and I just have the privilege every day, sometimes multiple days, per week, most of the weeks, to speak to people like you who impressed me by your words in your books and your podcasts and other speeches that you've done. I just listened to your speech not too long ago with yeah, Yuri Bezmenov and things like that. Like, these are incredible feats of technology that, yeah, like in my short lifespan, 15 years ago, like we couldn't do this. 10 years ago, this just wasn't a thing. And just to, waffle on a little bit more, in my world, I try to help people with their personal growth, their personal development, their business, their goals, and things like that. And even as little as 5 years ago, to say to someone, we could do business via the internet, they would look at me and think, like, what are you trying to sell here? I don't want to do business via the internet. I want to be next to you. I want to see your eyes. I want to be belly to belly, eyeball to eyeball, face to face with you. Otherwise, I don't see any value. Whereas nowadays, I can spend time like this coaching people, and they're like across the street. They can be, yeah, two suburbs over, and they insist on the Zoom because of its convenience. So I guess, yeah, I definitely appreciate every day the opportunity to be with people like yourself, and have this opportunity thanks to this World
Well,
Wide
thank
Web and these fancy
you.
gadgets.
It is a joy, no question. So, well, how are we going to save the world?
Yeah, that's why I got you here. I was hoping you'd tell me all the answers and go straight to the back of the book and figure that out. But as I'm from the future here, I can probably tell you that everything works out all right. I'm at least a day, half a day in front of you, so I can tell you that it all works out, and you've got nothing to worry about. So
At least I
uh,
have a day and a half that I
yeah,
don't have to worry about.
yeah, you've got a day and a half of grace that you can just relax and go tidy the house and fix up everything, while I fix most of the problems here in the other side of the world. Now, look, that is a great question. How are we going to solve the world? And I think it'd probably be remiss of me to ask you of the genesis of your findings, discoveries. How what was the process? Maybe the awakenings, like the red pill, if to use your your website and your academy and things like that, like is your university. To use that metaphor, like what was your red pill moment, or were there multiple red pills that you had to swallow before you started to see what was under the hood?
It was definitely the latter. Yeah. There was no one thing that I can think of that was so dramatic that it shattered my life, and turned me in a different direction. But I could think of hundreds of little things that shattered me a little bit and
Mm.
turned me around for the day or two. I went through some illnesses. I went through some economic problems. I had to learn a lot. And in retrospect, I find that all of the worst things that ever happened to me that I thought were the worst things at the very time that it happened turned out in retrospect to be blessings in disguise because they forced me to take a different direction. They forced me to learn. First of all, I learned something, and it forced me to heed what I learned. And I started off in one direction, and I come to a brick wall, and then, well, I'm frustrated. I'm defeated. I'm no good. And I'll turn, make a right angle. Oh, well, this is not so bad. Oh, well, yeah, this is good. I should have done this in the first place.
Mhm.
And then you hit another brick wall. Oh, man. I mean, I went through a couple of illnesses where I'd been given a death sentence. I mean, I was still in my late 20s or early 30s. I've forgotten my exact age. I'd been diagnosed as multiple sclerosis, for example. Well, make a long story short on that, that's not, I didn't even know what multiple sclerosis was. that doesn't sound good. And I looked it up in the encyclopedia, and I was right. It's not very good.
Mhm.
I thought, well, there's no cure for this, they say. And so anyway, I was crippled. I was in bed and I had a family to support, and I couldn't do that. But I had been giving speeches on the United Nations. It was long before I wrote my first book on the UN. And but I was giving speeches, and I had become quite aware of the chicanery that goes on under the hood of that bus called the United Nations. And so I was giving speeches on it, and I got a call from a publisher of a publishing house and said, "We'd like to have you write a book for us on the United Nations. We hear you give a whopping good speech on it. Could you write a book?" Well, now the truth of the matter is, excuse me for going into this personal element, but it illustrates what I'm saying. The truth of the matter is that I couldn't write. I never was a writer. I was, believe it or not, as a little kid, I was a child actor in Detroit, Michigan. I was on most of the network stations in America. If they had a station in Detroit, like WXYZ or WWJ, and they needed a child actor, like on the Lone Ranger, I was a child actor on that show and numerous broadcasts and Hermit's Cave and the Ford Theater and so forth. If they needed a little kid to say, "Gee, Dad, here come the Indians," or something, that they scared me. And so I was going to the university as a major in drama and communications. That was my career. Worked my way through college. I had a full-time, not a full-time, almost a full-time job as a radio announcer in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so that was my career. And I thought I was eventually going to go to Hollywood and become another Cecil B. DeMille, you know. I
Mhm.
was going to produce epic films. And well, anyway, that didn't work out for obvious reasons. That there's only one Cecil B. DeMille, and a lot of kids with better talent than mine who were washing cars and schlepping dishes in a coffee shop, just waiting for their big break. You know, they had far more talent than mine. And by this time, I had a wife and a couple of kids. Had one kid and one on the way. I had to get a real job. So that's all background. So here I am. I'm giving speeches, which is something I was trained to do, more so, on the United Nations. And so this publisher says, "How would you like to write a book for us?" Well, I can't write a book, but am I going to tell him that? No, I needed the job, and I didn't think I had much longer to live anyway. So I thought at least I could hunch behind a desk and scribble out a book. But I was afraid I couldn't. I couldn't write a book. I'd never written anything in my life. But instead of saying that, I remember saying, "Oh, yeah, no problem." So I was forced to write a book, and I didn't know how to write. And I went through the period of, I guess, 2 or 3 months where I pulled together all of the sources that I had referenced in my speeches and went beyond that and got good references and footnotes and everything, and had a couple of banker boxes full of notes. And as time came, right. Well, we've all seen movies of the frustrated writer who has a writer's block. You know, he's trying to type away, and then pulls the paper out of the typewriter, rolls it up, throws it away, and goes back, tries not. That was me in real time. I was. Well, by the way, meanwhile, I found out I didn't have multiple sclerosis
Wow.
toward the end of that project. But at the time, I thought I had it. I couldn't move. I was crippled and all that stuff. But I was just kind of worn out. But that's another story. But anyway, that was my block. I had to do something else, and so I remember sitting there that day. I have to write something, and I couldn't write anything. And finally, I got so frustrated. I just said, "I'm going to write anything." And I started Mersey dotes, dozy votes, you know, A, B, C, D. Why am I here? What are you thinking? And I started to say something. This subject of the United Nations is so big, it's impossible to grasp. It's like a huge ball of glass, so big you couldn't get your arms around it. Where do you start? And I thought, well, that's not a bad way to start. And that is how I started my book.
Wow.
I looked at it, well, what do you know? I can write. And from that time, all of a sudden, I enjoyed it because I realized I could do it. And so there's example number one. I've gone through a lot of things in my life where I thought I had just come to an end. But because of that roadblock, it forced me to make a right angle turn, or in some cases, a complete about face, and get on a path that really was better suited to me. So,
Mm.
you asked me what was it that made me uh, follow the path I did, and I honestly can say I don't remember all of it, but I do know that it was a lot of brick walls that I banged my head into, like the one I just told you about. I've had several of those. Economic problems. I was, well, I won't go into all of them. Little things along the way. I finally got a job with a large insurance company as a underwriter and a sales assistant selling group insurance, you know, health insurance for a corporation. Companies of 50 or more people have their insurance policies. Well, I would design and help the salesman promote those programs to the employers. So that was my career at the time. And then I decided that I wasn't going to climb the corporate ladder anymore because the world was falling
Are
apart.
you over 40, successful but unfulfilled? Do you feel stuck, like you're not truly living up to who you really are? So many high achievers wake up and think, I'm a good person, I read all the books, I listen to all the podcasts, yet there's something missing. Well, you're not alone. I've been there myself quite a few times. And quite frankly, it took a lot of years of really fucking around, trying to figure out what I now call your higher self blueprint, which has enabled me to live a life and make a living with my passions and my purpose. If you're ready to break free from a life that's holding you back, I'm hosting a free training around the 5 pillars of success that will enable you to create a more meaningful, fulfilling, and purposeful life. So click the link in the show notes and I look forward to seeing you in the training. But for now, let's get back to the podcast.
And I don't know how much you want to hear all of this, but I'll just give you the one more example. While I was in that position with this large New York-based insurance company, I had to visit one of my clients in Los Angeles, the California Cotton Oil Company, as I remember. And as I was sitting in the waiting room, I was looking around for the usual collection of trashy books, that they have out for you to read. How to fish, how to buy $1 million yacht, or what something is sports magazine or girly magazine or something. And I'm looking around for something to read, and they don't have anything except one little booklet about the size of Reader's Digest, that size. It was called The Free Man, and they had a stack of them. The same issue, but a stack of about 12 of them sitting there. I said, oh, I guess I'll read that. Well, that was a changer because while I sat there, I started to read an article. It was the first piece of literature I had ever read in my life that promoted the free market concept intelligently. I'd gone through school, gone through the university. I'd been taught the free market was chaos, that was never going to work. It produced inequality, it allowed people to be wealthy without merit, and the poor people who had merit would be forever under the heel of the ruling class and so forth, the rich capitalists and so forth. So I'd been taught that. That's what I believed. This was the first time I read something from the point of view of the value of free market economics. I got about halfway through the article, and suddenly the receptionist said, "Oh, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Avery will see you now." So I'm thinking, well, they've got 12 of them there. Maybe they want people to take one. So I typed one of those little things, stuck it in my briefcase. I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I thought they wanted people to take it. And
Sure.
that turned out to be true. And so I completed my interview with the guy. And I took this little magazine home, The Free Man, and I read it from cover to cover. It was filled with little articles from the perspective of the free market. And I was stunned because I had not seen or heard of anything like that. And by this time, I'm probably 24 years old, something like
Wow.
that. And so I then subscribed to this magazine. It's published by the Foundation for Economic Education in Irvington on Hudson, New York, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And it was all about free market ideology. And I liked it so much and became an avid reader of it. I even decided to order all the back issues.
Wow.
That was expensive because they were hardbound by this time.
Mhm.
So even today in my library, I've got all those hardbound issues of the Free Man magazine. So I devoured this stuff. I had a taste bud for it. And then the day came when I had to deal with what am I going to do about it? Am I just going to read about it? Am I just going to say, somebody, we got to make a change? Am I going to run for politics or something and live that life? Or what am I going to do about it? So I quit my job. my, my poor wife thought I was the craziest loon she'd ever heard of. So she said, what are we going to use to put the groceries on the table? And I remember, so I said, I don't know, but we'll figure it out, which we did, but it was some pretty rough times afterwards. And
Wow.
that's when I decided, well, I had to put groceries on the table, and nobody's going to pay a lot of money to listen to somebody stand on the stage and talk to them about free market economics or about the chicanery, the fraudulent literature that promotes the United Nations and what the true nature of it is. That's all unhappy stuff, you know. You don't make money doing that.
Mm.
So I decided I had to start using my skills that I had earlier. And maybe I could produce some very cheap documentary films instead of talking to groups of 60 people or 40 people at a time in somebody's living room. I'm going to get big time. I'm going to go on film. So I'm rattling on, but this is how my life changed. So I had some people that had attended my lectures and they gave me their business cards and said, if you need any help, you know, let me know. And so I thought, oh, I'll take them up on it. So I got some investors together and we created some limited partnerships to produce a series of 6 very low budget documentaries. And I told the investors, I said, I don't know that we can produce a profit, but I'm sure going to try.
Mhm.
And but at least if you can look at this as a donation, and if it doesn't work out, at least it's a tax deductible donation. So I had a few people like that came through. They really believed in what I wanted to do. And I'm happy to report that I think there were 7 of those films. 6 of them produced a small profit. They were able to get all their money back, plus a little bit more. And in the 7th one, we just broke even. It was just almost to the penny. It was embarrassing.
Mhm.
But we got the films out. And one of them was Yuri Bezmenov's film. And then we had a couple of more that are still echoing around on the website today on the internet. So that was a very fortunate thing. Now back to your question. How did I wind up where I am today? It's through a series of things like that.
Yeah,
No
I'm loving
one
this
thing.
story, by the way, Ed. I think it's great.
Yeah, there's no
Like
one thing.
little breadcrumbs of
Exactly.
lights along the runway sort of thing that just keeps steering you in the path.
Yeah.
And the thing is that's inspiring too is like not to blow smoke up your skirt, but you looked at those breadcrumbs and you took a nibble here and there and thought, you know, there's something in this. Like even just to take that book on the assumption that perhaps it was there for you to devour and to go into at a later stage. You couldn't read it whilst you're waiting for someone, but you could definitely read it later on, you know, as you before you went to bed or something like that. So
Even if I did have to type
inspiring.
it. No, it turned out that this guy, he laughed about it and he said, yeah, of course. That's why we had 12 of them out there.
Yeah. I wonder how many people before you took one though.
I don't
They
know.
probably
I don't know.
started with 12 and ended up with 11. That you
Maybe I
you're
was
the
the
only
only
one that
one.
grabbed it.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. So what I'm loving about this story is that you mentioned just a minute ago, or not too long ago, where you said, you know, how can I take on this job when the world's falling apart, that sort of thing. And that's interesting when you talk about the UN and you talk about the world falling apart, and you're in your 20s, which is 70 years ago. So, you know, we're now at the precipice of, you know, I've listened to some of your speeches that have made it through the interweb of things, and I can hear some of the things that you're talking about. You address the group of saying, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to tell you some information that is uncomfortable to hear. It's unpleasant. It's not something that is terribly pleasant, and it can be frightening. You sort of preface this with a degree of you should pay attention to this because it's not a heartwarming story. And then you go into the manipulation of man, whites against blacks, tying people down to a, socioeconomic area, or pinning them down to working hard, paying taxes, and then using all of those funds to profit wars and sanction against like other peoples, and all of these things, which I'm butchering everything that you've said in your speech, but it's, to me, it's like looking into a mirror of the past. It's like looking into a crystal ball that you had, which is, I don't know, you've probably been asked this question a million times, is like, how did you know? Like, how did you come up with these answers, and obviously have the need to want to share it with someone? Because I can tell you, just from the last 5 years of speaking out against the current narrative that's been pushed for the last couple of years, and during the COVID and all that kind of stuff, all these lockdowns and the shit to do with business and whatever, I was called a loony and conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hat wearer and all the other names that you can think of. So for me to think about putting myself in your shoes 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago and saying all of these things, it's a wonder you weren't taken out. Like, people have been people have been murdered for a lot less.
Well, that is true. I've often wondered about that myself, and I've been almost, now this is a joke, but I'm almost disappointed because I think I guess I'm not doing my job. What's wrong with me?
You're not trying hard enough.
They should be coming after me by now.
That's hilarious.
No, yeah. Well, there's some stories on that too. I remember I was very paranoid about that sort of thing, and I remember I used to carry a gun around with me all the time because I was on the road a lot, and I'd be traveling a lot of back roads, and sometimes I'd be sleeping in cheesy little motels in the deep woods of Northern California, and there's just people knew where I was going and when I was going to be there. I thought, if somebody wanted to put me out of business, that would be real easy to stage an attack on me. So I used to carry a gun around, and I used to worry about it, and okay, I'll tell you another story. That's how this ends. I was in the little town in Northern California, not too far from the coast, and there's a lot of nothing up there but trees. About 1:30 in the morning, because it was a long drive through the woods, and I thought there's not going to even be any motels there, much less one that's open. Well, it turned out that there was a motel. The old sign was blinking away. It kind of reminded me of what's that horror movie? The, where the woman gets stabbed. What is it? Yeah, the motel, whatever. You don't remember.
Yeah, yeah,
People
yeah.
know the story.
I get the
Yeah,
picture.
you get the picture. Yeah. I thought, well, this is where I I'm going to be. So I checked in the motel. They got out of bed and said, yeah, gave me a key, told me it was down the road. So I went down there, and it was hot that night, even though it was Northern California. It was a hot day and still hot there. And I opened up the window from my room to let the air in, and the motel was sort of built on a carved-in area from a hill that came down. So they just cut the hill. So when you open up the window, there's the dirt cliff about maybe 5 feet away. So there's just like an alleyway there between you and the dirt. And I get out there, oh, that's usual. And I stuck my head out, getting the fresh air, and I turned to the left, and I saw this guy leaning up against the wall. He had a pair of white overalls, I could see it clearly, and he's leaning up against the wall with his head back on the wall, right next to my window. This is 1:30 in the morning.
Mm.
I come slamming down the window. I'm thinking, uh-oh, it's happening. Somebody's waiting for me. So I go in, I open up my case there, and I get my revolver out and make sure it's loaded, and I lock all the doors. I make sure that window is locked, and I'm going to bed, and I can't go to sleep because I know this guy's coming after me, right? Why else would he be there at 1:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
So anyway, you're going to love this story when it comes to an end. So uh, I couldn't get any sleep. I think I finally went to sleep when I saw the sun coming up, and I slept. And then when it was time to get out of bed, I don't know, I'm going to guess it was probably 11 o'clock or something like that. And So I went over to the window and very gently unlocked it and raised it and stuck my head out and looked to the left. And sure enough, right there next to my window was a pair of white overalls hanging on a nail.
Wow.
All of that for a pair of white overalls hanging on. And I thought to myself, how stupid you are to be so worried about things like if somebody was coming to get you anyway, they're going to get you whether you close the window or not.
Mm.
And that's when I stopped carrying a gun. Or I shouldn't tell anybody. Let everybody think I carry a gun, but I don't, because I don't think it would make any difference. But those are the kind, my life is filled with lessons that I've learned pretty much the hard way, you know? It
Yeah.
hurts a lot when you act foolishly and then you have to face up to your own weaknesses and fears, unfounded fears, whether they're founded or not. I should say for the record that I think fear is a valuable thing. It's not something to be avoided. It's just something to not let it take you over. I think fear is a good natural instinct that puts us on warning that we better be alert. But if you let it dominate your life, well, that's another thing.
Mm.
But so I was letting fear dominate my life. I couldn't, a lot of things I wouldn't even do because of that. So
Yeah.
anyway, there
Well,
we go.
fear is crippling, and fear is a debilitating emotion, and fear is something that the powers that be use to as a controlling mechanism. You know, you can just tell.
Oh yeah.
In my lifetime, the last couple of years has been the greatest learning curve of my existence because you get to see firsthand how people behave and react when they're the most fearful. And it's disgusting to say, but I saw people fighting like with their hands and fists over toilet paper in a shopping aisle. You know, like it would just got to the point where it was sending people nuts. So yeah, I totally get that. And also, you're speaking into my soul there because like a large part of my life has been fear driven, and it's if it's not fear of missing out, it's fear of not being enough, it's fear of not reaching the target, fear of failure, fear of regret. I mean, you know, it's a lot of fear based, and so it has been useful, but it also has been crippling at times as well. So anyway, I wouldn't mind switching gears for a little bit because I know you've got a million stories and you've probably told them all probably a million times, but I
Well,
guess,
some of them I haven't told. I
oh,
think
okay.
I
Well,
think I told
I'll
the
keep
story about the
optimistic.
overalls. I might have told that story twice.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm super privileged. That's
That's
awesome.
not too bad. Not too bad.
Yeah, you're doing well. Well, I guess the the overarching theme that seems to have evolved through this podcast is I look to solutions. So, you know, at the outset of this conversation, you said, you know, you just wanted to solve the problems. Like you know, what are we going to do about this situation? And you said to yourself at certain times, like, what am I going to do about this situation or this? Now that I've got this knowledge, what am I going to do about it? And so, for me, in my lifetime, a quote that comes to mind is like, to learn and not to teach is not to learn. So for me, I have a value of acquiring knowledge, but one of my highest values is speaking it, is sharing it with other people. And a large part of my life and livelihood has been in a teaching position of some sort, not a school teacher or a primary teacher or whatever it is, but you know, teaching someone else something. So I guess I'm looking for answers, and the reason why I reach out to people like yourself is because you don't know what you don't know, and I'm always looking for a different perspective, another point of view, a little nugget of wisdom or gold that I can take with me, and my listeners can take with them, and implement and integrate into their lives to make themselves and the world a richer place for it. So if we can just point to solutions of current world problems, we're in a lifetime now where digital currency seems like it's an inevitable future for a lot of people. In Australia here, they're really cracking down on having a digital ID, a digital identification for every man, woman, and child in this country. So and I feel like Australia and the UK and Canada, for example, these sort of Commonwealth nations have been the hardest done by in terms of totalitarian ruling and those sorts of things. So maybe I can hand it over to you to speak to some of
To
the
me,
solutions that you may have thought about, and maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you were too far ahead of the game, but now might be the most perfect time to say it.
yes. The reason I'm pausing is because there's so many ways to answer that question,
Mm,
and the 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 policy I like to follow in my own thinking process is to work from the general to the specific, or from the unknown to the known, not from the larger to the smaller. There's a temptation to jump into the granular things right at the start, and then you can have a lot of disagreements on how to solve a problem when you haven't yet agreed as to what the problem really is.
yeah.
So to answer that question, I think that if we go to really start from the beginning point is to ask, what is the problem? Is it just that the civilization, the culture that we live in is going to hell in a handbasket? Is that the problem? I don't think it is. I think the real problem is, why is it doing that?
Mm,
And that's not even the real problem. That's who is doing that. And the next problem is, how are they doing it? Now we're talking. Now that we know who, how, and why, we can talk about solutions. But unless it's just the bad guys versus the good guys, we don't know who the bad guys are. They're good actors, a lot of them,
mm,
superb actors. And we're living through an era right now, I think, where we've seen more controlled opposition than ever before in history. They used to call it treason.
mhm.
Now it's just phony leadership. They used to conquer from outside. They invade. Now they conquer from the inside by winning elections, things like that. So we're living in a new period, and if we don't understand that this is a new war style, that this is not only bombs and guns and physical coercion, but also, and in many cases, primarily psychological warfare, and that people today who used to be have to be forced to do something against their own good, uh, their own advantage, forced to do things they don't want to do, had to be forced by physical coercion or threats, now do it on their own will and eagerly. They line up for those shots, for example, because they think it's on their mind. They think that's the right thing to do. Mind, and make it so that the individuals who are to be enslaved want to be, and ask for it and applaud for it. Even though they don't like it, they believe it's for their own good. And if they're really altruistic enough, they believe it's also good for you and for everybody. And so they're really good people at heart, but they're stupid. Now, I need to define that word. It's not because they are stupid, it's they're ill-informed. They're not informed. And not only are they not informed, they've been programmed not to consider certain things. They don't even want to hear it. And that, it's tempting to call it stupid. I did that just because I wanted a little shock value there. They're not really stupid. Some of them are very smart people, but they have been programmed. And let me tell you, I have been programmed. I'm the last one to say that I am not stupid. I have been very, very stupid a lot in my lifetime, and probably still am in a lot of the issues that I haven't yet really had the as my aunt would say, the perspicuity. That's a word that very few people use anymore.
Mhm.
I've never had the perspicuity to really look at it objectively. It's a combination of fear and not wanting to be an outcast in society, not want to be the guy with a tin foil hat that people laugh at. And not, I don't want to be the guy who goes to jail because they believe something which now the law says is illegal. All those things. But back to the main issue. So today is, we're living in a time of total war, in my view. And we're living in a time of total global involvement in that war. It's not just one nation against another nation or a group of nations against another group of nations. Although we're being led to believe that's the case. It's not just one religion against another religion. As you know, I'm sure you know very well, that part of that psychological strategy, psychological warfare, is to divide all of us into as many small groups as they can. Because if we ever unite, my gosh, our numbers are so far superior to theirs that the ruling elite in the world today is far, far less than 1/10 of 1% of the population. And the only way they have a chance of making their supremacy last is to keep all of us fighting against each other, and then they can step in and say, "We'll protect you from them." You from them, always you from them. You know? And so that's part of the warfare. So I'm rambling a little bit, but I start at the basic, which is that this is a war, and we're in it whether we know it or not. And even the people that don't think about these things or care about them, they're in the war too, but they just don't know it. So fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, those people will never make a difference. There's an old saying, it's kind of funny but true. It says how does it go? There are three kinds of people. There are those people who make things happen, and there are those things who watch things happen, and then most of them, there are people who don't even know that anything's happening in the first place. And I find that to be true.
Yeah.
As much as I hate it, I hate to say it, but it's true. Most people don't care because they think that they can't do anything about it. That's another issue. Why don't they care? Why is there so much apathy? And it's because they suspect that something really foul is going on, but they're convinced in their own minds, that's the psychological warfare again, that they can do nothing about it. So why worry about it? Just pray, pray to God that they'll be protected or that they'll go to heaven or something, and which is nothing wrong with that. I do that myself, but that's the end of they think that's the end of their ability is to ask God to intercede for them. They don't realize that they could actually do something against these tremendous odds. That's part of the psychological warfare, which remind me, I want to come back to that, because I think that's one of the reasons that today we see so many people at high places all of a sudden, instead of just being deep staters like we've always thought they were, now they seem to be on our side, whatever that means. That means they're calling attention to some of the most horrible things that have been going on as though they never knew about them before. And some of them have been involved in them. But now they're speaking with alarm, and they're on television, and they're running for office, and people think, oh, he's holding the Constitution up, and he's talking about our constitutional republic, and he's talking about reducing government and getting these child molesters in jail and so forth. He's got to be a good man. See? There comes a time in psychological warfare where it's advantageous to let your victims know what's going on, as long as you, by doing so, you further convince them that it's way beyond their ability to do anything about it. It's like living in the slums in New York or Detroit, and you know that your block and for several blocks around are all controlled by the mob. You live in it. The mob controls it. There's nothing you can do about it. So you just play along and you don't complain. You do what you can and hope that you stay out of trouble with the mob. And you certainly don't try and get organized and do anything about it. You can talk about the mob and all that, but the mob loves it because they know that the more you understand how much power they have, the less likely they're going to have to do anything with you. You're so totally afraid of it. That's one of the major tentacles of warfare as advanced by Sun Tzu, the Chinese philosopher and strategist, military strategist, in his book, let's see, what's it called? His book.
Not the art of
Anyway,
war.
Sun Tzu's, I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, look it
Art
up.
of
Sun
war or war of art? Art of war? Is that
Art of
what?
War. That's it.
Yeah.
The Art of War. Yeah. All right. Thank you. The Art of War. All the military academies in the world study Sun Tzu, and one of his principles is that supreme excellence in warfare is to defeat your enemy without having to engage him in battle.
Mm.
And one of the most common and trusted and proven ways is to convince him that he doesn't stand a chance, and that if he tries, it's not going to go well for him. It was Tamerlane and Genghis Khan used to practice that so well back in the day. And the Orient, they go through an area, and if there's a little village there with a stone wall around it, all they had to do was just walk up and bang on the gates and say, "This is Tamerlane," or "This I speak for Tamerlane. Open the gates." And if they understood that Tamerlane was not to be played with, but if any of them refused, Tamerlane and Genghis Khan, to all those guys, would bring their troops to the village, and they were sworn by honor never to abandon the battle until they had destroyed that city. If it took a year, even if there were 500 people in there, they always would have to tear it down at any cost. And when they were done, they would stack up the heads of all the humans and all the animals, including the birds, the canaries and the cats and the dogs, or whatever, any living thing that might have been inside that wall. The heads were chopped off, and they were stacked up outside the gate in a pyramid. And then they would move along after they took everything they wanted. Maybe there was some pillaging going on, of course, but and raping and so forth, the usual rewards of war. But they would go on. But now the city is on a trade route. And as the traders come along and they pass this village and they see this mountain of heads stacked up out there, you know what they're going to do? They're going to talk about it. They talk about it. The word passes around. Don't mess with Tamerlane. This is what's going to happen to you. So after they do that to a couple of villages, they don't have to fight or break down the walls at all. They say, open the walls or else. And so they open the walls and give them whatever they want. Now, when you see in our modern world the same strategy, people say, oh, that they wouldn't be that smart to do that. But they would be if they could convince you that all of the things that we see in the world today are engineered by them now. They're not necessarily on our side. They're not really telling us anything we don't know now. We know that too. So now they can be at the head of the parade and say, it look like they're leading the opposition when all they're doing is just telling us what we already know so that we will trust them. And we will not have to fight them. We would say, you are our leader. And they will actually do some things that are good to make it look good. But when the push comes to shove, they will betray them and they will end up as slaves. Now, I could go on, but you're asking me what's going on in the world today and what do we do about it? The first thing we have to do about it is understand that this is a psychological war. And then we have to understand some of the tactics of the psychological war. The one I just mentioned is just one of them. We have to understand them if we're going to fight them effectively. And then number three, we've got to decide that just knowing about it is not enough. Now we come to the original question, what do we do about it? And teaching about it is the first step, but it's not the only step.
Mm-hmm.
So we become teachers, but now what? Now everybody knows about it and they're getting scared by it and willing to go along with it because they don't think they can do anything to stop it. What do we do about it? Is there any way that we can recapture control of our system against such unified forces we now know is around us? And the answer is yes. Now we're talking. Now we get to the question that you asked, what do we do about it? And teaching is important, but it's not enough. Now we have to take action. Well, what action is it? Is it military action? No. We're losing this war not with military action, but with psychological and political pressures, opinion molding. They call it opinion engineering and so forth. You've got to become experts in opinion, psychological warfare, and fight on that level. And it can be done. That's how they defeated us. It's not going to be done, as my old timers used to say, Ed, it's not going to be done by the next election. You know, it's taken all this time. You're not going to do it in the next 4 years, but it can be done. Well, of course, the time is running out. If we don't get moving pretty soon, it's just going to get harder and harder and harder to do it, and the price will be higher. But it can be done. And how? What does that look? What does that look like? All right, now we finally get to it. We have to. I believe we have to build a parallel movement. I call it a movement. It's not an organization. It's a movement. It looks like an organization, but it's not really. Maybe more, but I'm aware of two in the world to get things done. One is the classic one, it's the pyramidal organization. It's got the leaders at the top, at the very top. You know, we've all seen the all-seeing eye on a dollar bill. There's probably one person or a group of 3 or 6 at the very top, and then all the middle management, and then the workers down below. All the grunt work is done down below, but everything is in a pyramid. Now that's the corporate world, that's the military world, and unfortunately that has been the world that was built by most patriots who want to try and push back against that. They think we got to have a pyramid, a strong man in a white horse, an organization where we take no guff, no debates, just we decree it and everybody does it, and then we stand a chance of winning. Of course, by that time, they're no different than the opposition. It's like during World War II, America became fascist in order to defeat fascism in Europe. Because they felt, and they said so in plain English, that you can't defeat these militaristic empires like Germany, Nazi Germany, and fascist Italy and so forth. You can't defeat them with a constitutional republic. You've got to have ironclad rules. But we'll get rid of that right after the war, you understand. Well, of course, that never goes away on its own free will. So we became like fascism in order to defeat fascism. Well, this is the thing we have to worry about. When we want to defeat this kind of thing, we cannot adapt the same principles of warfare that they do, because they use psychological warfare now mostly. That we should imitate, because that's how we reach the hearts and the minds of the people who have to push back. And that means the young people. And by the way, a little side note, that in my experience, I have found that the young people are more open to these ideas than the old folks are. Because I don't know why that is, but they're just more open. I guess they see that the absurdity of doing the same things over and over and over again is going to produce the same results over and over again. And they can see that what I'm talking about is different from what their present leadership is proposing. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sort of off the rail again, but to go back to, we have to build a movement based on people, that 1% or less of the population that's going to make a difference. It's, the people who are making things happen, and then the people who watch things happen and forget about the people who don't even know anything is happening. Mm-hmm. My own version of that is that I think that history has always been written by 1% approximately of the population. These are the thought leaders. These are the movers and shakers, the originators, the strong-minded people who can visualize into the future, see consequences, and know something about the history, and they're in the middle of it trying to put the two together. That's 1% or less of the population. They're pretty rare, but they're always there. And that 1% gathers around it the 3%, which includes the 1%, so it's an additional 2%. Now we have a 3% body of people who are the movers and shakers. Now they may not be the original thinkers so much. Most of them have other professions, and they have jobs. They have to make a living. They have families. They can't spend their lives dreaming like you and I probably are doing about these things all day and all night long. They've got other things to do, but they're the opinion leaders. That's what we're calling them now, the opinion leaders. the people who have the blogs, the people who are giving the speeches, people who are producing the videos, the people who are running for office, the people who are speaking out in the field of education. Anyway, these are the opinion leaders in a community. That's 3% of the population, approximately. This is my take on it. Now we're cooking. The 3% will make so much energy and noise and clash and clack, 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 and they'll be talking about it, that will attract another group a little bit larger to have a 15% group of the people who are the warriors, the ones who will implement change in a society. 15% is all you need. The American Revolution is a perfect example of that. That was won by 15 or less than 15% of the population of the colonies. There were 15% on the other side. They were loyalists. And that left 70% in the middle who were saying, gee, I don't know, whichever side wins is okay with me. They didn't want to get involved and did not get involved. So we had the loyalists, the know-nothingers, and the patriots, the ones that were that 15%. You see that ratio, that, of course, it's hard to know the exact numbers in history, but you get the impression that's a good ratio average for every major movement in history that we have a recorded history of. It's that small 15 percenters that make it happen. Do we have 15% of the population who agree with us? Absolutely. More than that. We actually have it. The only problem is they don't know who they are, each other. They think they're alone, most of them. They think, oh my gosh, the world has gone crazy because they look at the world through their boob tube, through the television. And all they see is the other side. That's part of the psychological warfare. If you convince your opponent that he doesn't stand a chance, he's outnumbered, why then they sit back and they won't speak out. And they're very timid and they're afraid to be unpopular. They're afraid of losing their jobs and so forth. So now, having said that, what do we want to do to change all this? We've already got the 15% out there who understand, I believe this is true. They understand deeper than the 70 and the rest of the 70%. And they are like you and I, we want to do something about it. But our job is to find out who each other are, come together and decide to work together on some plan, some ideology, some principles that we can all agree upon. That's the next thing we got to have. We can't just say, replace the bad guys with us, the good guys. That's not good enough because who knows who the good guys are, really? We have to have the principles by which you determine who the good guys are, which is why when I started to put this together years ago, Darren, I came up with the idea of producing a creed of freedom. What do we believe in if we want to build liberty and freedom in a society? What are the qualities? What are the beliefs, the structures that are necessary? Has this ever been done for our side? Now we got Karl Marx and Mussolini, and we've got Mao Zedong, and we got all these socialist writers. They are constantly coming up with a creed of collectivism, socialism, communism, fascism, Nazism, all the variants of collectivism. It's all the same thing. They're always writing novels about it. They've got the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx spells it out. This, and this. These are the points. This is it, brother. Who has done that for our side? And the answer is no one. Never been done. Why? It's because we're stupid. We haven't thought it through. So I thought, I wonder if it could be done. So I had a stab at it and came up with the Creed of Freedom. That was back in 2002. I thought I was going to be crucified by all my friends who all, you can't herd cats. And individualists like myself and you, we all have our strong opinions, and it's hard to get everybody to agree on anything. They may agree with it partially, but well, yeah, but you're wrong on that. And herding individualists is tough. And I thought, I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to be chewed up and spit out when people read this Creed of Freedom. Well, to my amazement, I have had, in all this time since 2002, and I don't know how many people have read the Creed of Freedom, but I'm going to guess millions on
Wow.
the basis of how our literature gets spread around. Anyway, a lot of people. And I've only had one complaint from one of those cats so far, and that was an attorney. And he wanted to debate with me over some vague legal principle on the formation of a militia, which isn't even in my Creed of Freedom. Anyway, so with that one exception, uh, I was amazed. I think we found it that this is the creed that all of us who believe as we do in liberty and privacy and freedom of at any level, freedom of speech, all of these freedoms we want. I can't imagine anybody finding any objection to it. So we have a creed. So now we've got everything in place. We've got the principles in which it's the gyroscope, the ideological gyroscope that keeps us all united. It's nothing else that unites us. We can have men and women, we can have Americans, we can have Russians, we can have Canadians, we can even have Australians
Hmm.
in this movement. We can have black, we can have white, we can have red and brown, we can have all races, we can have all cultures, as long as they believe in the creed of freedom and those principles, we are in unison. So one of our guiding rules is that when we work together, we work on those principles alone and don't try and get into differences that we might have in our religious point of view. Maybe we have with different classes of Christianity or something. No, 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 that's for outside. Do that in the churches. If you have an argument with somebody because of whether they should have two wives instead of one or whatever, that's not our mission, you know? Okay, as long as people can believe in the creed of freedom, that's all we ask them to do, which is a lot, because you can unite, in my view, you can unite almost every human being on the planet on the basis of that. Okay, so we got what we believe in, the creed. Now we've got the idea of an organization that's not pyramidal. It's not coming from the top all the way down. It's called horizontal, and it's like a hologram. It's a holographic organization. Now, a hologram is, I don't understand how it works, but I know what it does. It's a film. It's got scratches in it. I'm sure there are more than scratches, but they're circular rings in a certain way. And when you pass rarefied light through it, it forms an image, like a three-dimensional image, before your eyes. I don't know how it works, but I've seen them, and they really are there. And but the interesting thing about them is if you take this glass or plastic with these rings and sketched, circled into them, and you take a pair of scissors and you cut that sheet in half and separate them, you have two separate images, complete images, not just half, but the complete image. Smaller, but the complete image. And if you cut those in half, now you've got four. You cut those in half, now you've got 8 and 16 and so forth. No matter how many times you cut a hologram, each little piece contains the total knowledge of that, or the information, that the data
Mm.
of the hologram. And so this is an organization where if you got rid of all of the members of the organization except one, you've got the whole image there that can replicate and grow and reproduce itself. You don't need orders from the top coming down, because every single element in the hologram knows what the orders are. They've committed to them because they're in the creed of freedom. And they're not really orders. The things that you want to do instinctively, things that you think everybody should do for their own good and for everybody else. We all want the best for everybody, except we believe in doing it freely and voluntarily, where they're, by golly, if you don't agree with us to do what we think you ought to do, you're going to prison. And
Mhm.
if you don't like that, up against the wall, bang, you're through. So that's the difference.
I
So,
like it.
okay, here we go. Now we got the idea. We're getting people together. Now, what do these people do when they get together? Well, we know what they should do. They do the same thing that the Nazi Party does, the same thing the Communist Party does, all these other groups, what they do, except we don't use the same violent tactics that they do. I mean, they're willing to kill, murder, cheat, steal, blackmail, torture, This is all open game to them. They follow the art of the what do they call it? The rule, the ultimate rule of warfare, as the only. I think, if I get this right, they say the only immoral thing in war is to lose.
Hmm.
That's that's what I'm talking about. They follow that. They believe that they're at war with us, psychological war, and if necessary, military war too, but primarily a psychological war. And whatever is necessary to win is moral for them. So they can lie. In fact, they believe in it. It was Vladimir Ilyich Lenin who said, promises are like pie crusts made to be broken. And he's the originator of the Communist Party. And he's the guy that sets communists, real communists, away from Marxists. Marxist is just a guy that believes in socialism, and wrote about it. But Lenin, in his collected works of Lenin, time after time explained that the way to come to power, he said, comrades, if you walk into a country, then you want to come to power. Do you stand in front of them all and say, I'm a communist, we are communists, join with us, we're going to change your culture, we're going to change your legal system, all of your national heritage, we're going to change all of that and incorporate you into an international communist movement? No, they would not accept that. They would run us out on that rail. You tell them you're an anti-communist and you praise their nationality and their language and their legal system, and they'll love you for it, and they'll elect you as their leader. And then when we are in control and we have the power of leadership, now we can reveal ourselves, and they can do nothing about it, because if they object, we can shoot them. This is Lenin. Well, this is what's going on in the world, and people don't know it. So those are the things that we cannot do. But the fact that they organize at the grassroots level and have people everywhere, and look around. Every time you see something going on in the world, they'll put people into the streets, right? What the Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and those are all self-proclaimed Marxist-Leninist organizations. They tell you that. Well, if you know what Marxist-Leninist means, what I just told you, then you know how they operate, you see. But they have offices and groups, and of course they're well funded by George Soros and probably other people as well. And that's something we don't have, is a lot of money. But nevertheless, they have people on the ground, boots on the ground in every community and every country, to create noise and the appearance of political acceptance. Those are the people that you see on television all the time. And they're a small minority. But since you see them all the time, you think they're everybody and everywhere. So we finally have the answer to your question. We have a philosophy. We know what we stand for, not what we're against only. We have principles of our own, what we want to build. We have this organization. It was a holographic organization where we don't try and force everybody to follow orders. They just follow the creed of freedom. And everybody's on their own. There are no orders. Our only control over this is that if they violate the creed of freedom, then they're out of our group. That's all. The rest is up to them. And we have ways of measuring that. And we have ways, by the way, of selecting judges to judge that from the membership at large, not from the good old boys club. You're not going to have the Supreme Court lawyers judging other lawyers. They're all lawyers. Not that I love lawyers, but anyway, I had a lawyer friend who used to say that the 99% of lawyers create a bad name for the rest of us. I think he was right on target. Okay, so now I'm through answering your question.
A self-governing parallel system that is using similar strategies, but not the same, by way of you're doing this of your own volition and free will rather than the carrot and the stick and the force of hand and things like that. So you're
Exactly.
really saying to people to think for themselves under the creed of a set of guidelines, rules that everyone abides to,
Hmm.
not to sort of draw too many synergies to like a religious text, but it sounds like a Ten Commandments for sovereign human beings. I guess
Well,
I'm not
it's a
sure.
good analogy. Yes, it's really what it is. And
Yeah.
now, if somebody doesn't agree with that, and I find very few people, even those who appear to be on the other side of most of our issues, it's only because they haven't thought through all to the point where they could see the principles underneath those. You see,
Mm,
once they can see the principles, then they say, "Hmm, I guess I've been an individualist all this time and not a collectivist." And
yes.
those are the words, by the way, that we have to return to the English language is collectivism versus individualism.
Mm,
Because communism, fascism, Nazism, socialism, all this stuff, and just variants of collectivism. And it's collectivism that's our enemy. And it doesn't help if we have collectivists posing as deep state,
yeah.
fighting against collectivists posing as communists. They're all collectivists, but they'll fight against each other for one of two reasons, or both. They'll fight against each other, like Hitler against Stalin. Millions of lives can be sacrificed in this war. Why? Because they disagreed with each other? No. Read Marx, read Hitler, read Mein Kampf. You'll find that every single point is the same. They're fighting over territory. They're
Mm,
fighting over dominance. Who is going to be the chief cheese? But they
yes.
believe the same. So when you find collectivists in America, in the deep state, and they're saying, Americans, we have to worry about those damn communists, unite behind us
Mhm.
so we can fight communism, and the people fall for that, they just got captured by collectivism. A different brand, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. Just different
It's the
flavor.
same thing. So
Mm,
this now is my message. This, what I just said, is my message in answer to your question. What I want people to hear or know is what we're talking about, is that this is an age of deceit, and we're not going to survive until people start being a little bit skeptical about their leaders. They better wake up and start looking carefully instead of just saying, ah, that sounds good. He's our man, you know.
mm.
When you drive down the road and you see a sign at the side that says, vote for Billy Harris, a man you can trust. What? You cannot trust Billy Harris.
Mhm.
You cannot trust or should not trust any politician. Well, that sounds harsh, doesn't it?
Mm.
But Thomas Jefferson didn't think so. And this is where I got the idea anyway. I stole it from Jefferson. When the Constitution here in America was ratified, um, Jefferson got a letter from a doctor friend of his. And this is all, by the way, in the Jefferson archives. And the letter said, Dear Mr. Jefferson, now that we have this new Constitution, how can we be certain that only good men are elected to office? And Jefferson's reply was kind of tight. He said, Speak to me not of good men in office, rather, let us bind men down with the chains of the Constitution. Now, you translate that into modern vernacular. Jefferson was saying, Good men in office? Are you kidding? No, you're not going to have good men in office. You may have one or two once in a while, but in my view, Jefferson was saying, look, government is a place of a concentration of wealth and power. When you have wealth and power concentrated in any institution, whether it's government or corporations or churches or any institution, it's a magnet to the predator class. All the suede shoe con artists in the world want to work in government because they can pose as being protectors of the people while they're robbing the people or enslaving the people.
So true. Mm.
It's true. Once you get that picture in your mind, your whole attitude toward politics will change. You cannot rely on politicians or political parties or the political system. Now, it's necessary to have, but you better watch it like a dangerous dog. You better have a collar on it or maybe two. If that dog is vicious and capable of turning on you, which it is, you've
I like
got to be suspicious. You cannot afford to trust anybody in government.
Mm. I love that message, Edward, because it is, to me, what you're saying is to create a standard, a higher standard. And although you might have some necessary evils in the world, as to use a popular word, as a collective, we need to hold these people accountable to that higher standard as well as ourselves. And I think that gives us the highest probability of having safe, harmonious, fruitful society, life, culture, like everything melded all together, which just breathes into itself. I think if everyone has that higher standard, it's we can hold each other accountable. And I think it's true in politics, it's true in your marriage, it's true with your friendships, it's true with your children. If you're not an example of what that higher standard is, then how can you impose on others to live up to a certain level or a same standard or a similar standard to you? So I love it. In saying that though, everything that you say it elicits another 13 or 15 questions that I would love to ask. So I realize that we can't spend all day here, and I've taken a lot of your generous time already.
Well, I've got something for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, I'll put this aside for just a second. To implement the concept that I've just described, we created something called Red Pill University, all right? And that puts on a Red Pill Expo a couple of times a year. So the expo part of it is where we are broadcasting and reaching out to that 15%, that are looking for answers. They're looking for something they could believe in and trust. Even though we warn them, don't trust us any more than anybody. Because you can trust me, I think, but we're all vulnerable, everybody. I mean, if you're threatened by violence, or if your loved ones are threatened by violence, and look, you have a very pretty wife, and we know where she goes. It'd be something terrible if something should happen to your wife, and these guys are capable of doing physical harm. I don't care who you are. You might consider buckling in and doing what you've been told. Or, there's an old joke that says, I hope you don't mind jokes, and some of them a little bit shady. But anyway, the joke goes that this fellow's talking to a girl in a bar, and he said, I have a question for you. Would you have sex with a stranger for $100 million? And she said, $100 million? Well, sure. And he said, well, how about $25? And he said, what do you think I am? And he said, well, we've established that. We're just haggling over the price. Well, that's all right. I'm sorry. If anybody's offended by that, I apologize. But it does point out the fact that almost everybody has a breaking point, and our enemy knows how to find those points. It could be money. It could be your own safety. It could be torture. It could be loss of a job. It could be a lot of things. These are powerful people, and they reach out to good people and command them because of controls like that. So, having said that, we are trying to build an organization on a holographic basis. And we created the Red Pill Expo to reach out to that 15%. And then Red Pill University, which operates 24/7. And we're just beginning to build now what we call campuses of the university. Now, that's a little bit misleading, but it's only to make it fit the concept of a university.
Mm-hmm.
The university is not a brick and mortar place. It's not where you go when there's a teacher with a blackboard. It's a frame of mind. It's a place where you go to learn and meet with other academics such as yourself and form into coalitions and get ready to do battle against the collectivists who are out there. and it's kind of like a staging area. And so once that is done, that staging area will produce a group of people, as I see it, approximately 50 or 60 people in a small community. We'll call that a campus. Those are people who are really informed and really motivated and really dedicated to do the right thing. And their job is to go and become influential in their communities. By that, I mean, we want to control, and I'm not afraid of that word, we want to influence to the point of control over who is elected the mayor, the city council, in our country, we have the counties, county board of supervisors, and the board of education, the sheriff. Those are all local elected positions. We want to see good people who have no axe to grind except to preserve liberty. They're not in it for themselves. They believe in the creative freedom. We want to see those people in those positions. Start at the group at the lower level and build up, not from the top down. You can't build a movement from the top down. If you put a man in the White House, man on the white horse, I don't care how good he is. It's in one bullet away, he's through. But if you have a foundation at the bottom and you build upward, then you've got a chance of making a difference in the world. So we're starting at the bottom, at the community level, and we call those campuses. And they'll be not only in the United States. I'd love to see you become a leader of a campus right there in Sydney. It sounds to me like you'd be a good candidate. And now, in order to do that, we have to talk about this division between individualism and collectivism. There's a great divide between those two areas of thought. And I have produced a booklet called The Chasm, based on that concept. I guess you can see the chasm. And there's a picture of a deep canyon there and so forth. And what this contains, and this is free, by the way, I'm giving it away free if anybody wants it. It has a lot of illustrations in it and so forth. This is the essence of my next book. I've been working on it a long time, and it's going to be another thick one, I'm afraid. And I'm getting impatient. I want to finish it, but I'm not done yet. But I don't want to wait for these ideas that I'm going to talk about. The chasm deals with the conflict between collectivism and individualism. And that everything from this book I've been working on that deals directly with that has been pulled out and put into this booklet here. It's just 50 pages. And I think it's important. I want people to read this and judge it and say, yeah, that sounds like what I believe in. I think it'll be true in most cases. So if anybody wants to have a free copy of this, The Chasm, again, I'll hold it up there so you can see it. On the internet, just type in chasm, CHASM, realityzone.com. So that's chasm.realityzone.com. And you can sign up for a free copy. It'll be a download. You can print it, or you can just look at it, and you can make copies of it and hand them out.
Fantastic.
The people who will read this and say, yeah, that is something I believe in, those are the ones that are going to become the active members of campuses of Red Pill University everywhere in the world. When we have a network like that, our enemy will be through. Will not be able to stand against it. It can be done.
Amazing.
That's my message.
Thank you, Edward. Well, I'm sure when we get off this call, you'll send me all the details so I can put them in the show notes and let everyone know where to go. In saying that, I think you're a legend, and I really do take great pleasure in having the opportunity to meet you, albeit virtually, and have this conversation. It's been a thrill for me, so I appreciate you and thank you for your work that you've done over the years. And if the opportunity comes by, maybe we can do it again sometime. I'd really love that.
I would like to do that. Okay, right, Adrian, thank you so much.
Have an amazing day. Talk soon.
Okay.
Bye now.
All right.